welcome back to another Star Minigaming YouTube video. And I am actually just back from playing a game of Age of Sigmar with a army I'd never used before. And I wanted to kind of review what playing the army is like, right? We have a lot of times videos on, the stats of an army and how the army looks on paper, and we're like, oh, like this guy looks good because he's got a 3 to hit and a 2+ to wound, and he does, D3 damage, and he's got 25,000 attacks, and he ignores mortal wounds and things like that, right? And that's all well and good, but there's something to be said for actually playing an army and experiencing it firsthand on the tabletop. And so, as many of you know, I play primarily Death faction in Age of Sigmar, and I've played some Lizardmen or Seraphon. That was actually the first army that I began with in Age of Sigmar. Played probably 2 or 3 games with them before starting my Death faction and switching to primarily them. And I had been collecting a small Sigmar force. I know this isn't their rulebook. That's put away actually at the moment. But, this has the rules for all of them in here. Well, all the ones from the starter box anyways. I had a small Sigmar force of Stormcasts, and I really like the novels. I like all the Stormcast characters in it. I finally, after a really long time, decided, well, for me anyways, a really long time, decided which Storm host I was going to play, the Hallowed Knights. And so I painted up my Lord Celestant to be Gardas, and I painted up my Lord Relictor, and I'm looking to get a Lord Castellan, and I custom scratch built a Lord Celestin on foot, which will be Tarsus the Bullheart, and I scratch built a Knight of Zeros, which I'm not entirely sure which one I'm going to make him, because there's a few that have appeared thus far in the novelizations. But anyways, I wanted to have models for the characters that I've seen in the story, and that I particularly like, and the Hallowed Knights appealed to me. I'll go into that a bit more in another video, but this video, I just want to talk about how they played as a game, and how I feel about them. So I played today against a Khorne force, the Bloodbound, with some Bloodletters allied in, and I played against a Seraphon army. Which didn't have any summoning. None of us were bringing summoning, so we just decided just to leave it out of this entire game, make the game a little bit quicker. We didn't have as much time as we normally do, and we played 60 points in the SCGT comp, and I brought the Thunderstrike Brotherhood, using all the models from the starter box, and then I just added in my custom Knight of Zeros and 5 Judicators, and I added 2 more Retributors to the squad, so that I had 5 of them. I had to pay 8 points in the system for that. But, so that was nice. It allowed for my Stormcast to come in quickly. Had there been summoners, obviously they could have reacted quickly. The Knight of Zeros pairs well with that formation, because anyone that comes in via the Thunderstrike, or their Deep Strike ability, you could ignore the normal, you must set up outside of 9 inches of an opponent. You make this Deep Strike ability, I believe it says, let me check the verbatim so I'm not saying this wrong. Yeah, it just says in any of your movement phases that you can bring them in, not at the beginning, not at the end. So you can move your Knight of Zeros up and run him even if you'd like, and then Deep Strike them in within 5 inches of him. Which allows you to be within 9 of an enemy, and then you can still charge them in, because that just counts as their move for the turn. So it allows you to get your Stormcast onto the battlefield very quickly. If you're used to 40k, he's in essence, like a teleport homer, allowing them to boom, hit right there. There's, the Judicators obviously add some range punch. I filled them with the crossbows, which is nice because of their potential rate of fire. The only thing I don't like is they have no rend. And basically that's what I came across a lot of today, right? If you build and bring what's in the starter box, you have the 10 Liberators and the 3 Prosecutors, and then of course I added in a couple more Retributors, and the army was pretty boring to play, I'll be honest. I was not impressed. They come into the battlefield quite quickly. They do not move around particularly quickly. Even the Dracoth is not excessively fast. I believe he's like a 7-inch move. Sorry, 10-inch move with 7 wounds. But the rest of the army, you're looking at consistently 5 inches, 4 inches. 5 inches for the Liberator, 12 inches for the Prosecutors, 4 inches for the Retributors, 4 inches for the Lord Relictor. The army doesn't get around quickly once it's on the table. It doesn't have a lot of rend. It doesn't have a lot of heavy punch. The to hit and to wound rolls are comparatively to the novel and compared to other units in the Age of Sigmar, in knowing how powerful the Stormcast is supposed to be when compared to these other units from a narrative standpoint, is a bit underwhelming. Your Liberators hitting on 4s, needing 3s to wound and having no rend. Fighting something like a Blood Warrior, obviously that can take a while to... a Blood Warrior squad of equal size, it can take a while. Fighting things like Korgorath, sure, it's a little bit easier because of your Lalo the Tyrants. Sure, they can slowly whittle through an army of Blood Reavers and other units that have virtually no save or no save at all. Obviously, camping your Liberators on a piece of terrain, not a hill anymore, but a piece of terrain like a ruins or in a building or something, and giving them the +1 and then giving them the shields so that they're re-rolling ones on saves means that they're pretty survivable. Like the army basically comes down to it as they're a hyper elite army that, unless you're really like stretching a lot of Prosecutors or you're bringing a lot of the new Stormcast Extremist units, they don't have a lot of punch unless you're bringing things like the Retributors, but then you're sacrificing your speed. They have decent survivability, but not what I would like. Just quite frankly, if you're playing any kind of comp system or wounds or anything, right? Or even just what you have access to, because the Stormcast come in such smaller amount of models per kit, you're likely going to be severely outnumbered on the table. And sure, just looking at it on paper, the Stormcast might be worth 2 or 3 or 4 skeletons, but in a practical sense, when you're just throwing that many less dice, you have that many less opportunities for those good rolls that are going to help you. Maybe that 6 that you need with those Retributors to inflict 2 mortal wounds, or that 6 you need to wound with that Dracoth that Lord Celestin's riding to do d6 damage. Things like that. The Stormcast, and I don't really feel like they synergize too well, right? Like, obviously the starter box's commander has the most boring commander effect that you'll ever have because you're a Stormcast player, right? Your bravery's not amazing, but it's good enough that you almost will never have to test for bravery because you'll almost never lose enough models to make anything other than a 6, cause you to lose any guys, right? So the Stormcast models, in my opinion, in the game were very much mediocrity, right? You lack the numbers to roll enough dice with their lack of rend on most units. And then they're just kind of mediocre numbers, needing 4s and 3s and not really having the ability to buff that. Having no spellcasters, having a Lord Relictor that only 50% of the time will actually get something off on one of his prayers is not exciting. So really, they really feel like an army that is designed to be an introductory army. And that's why they're in the starter box, right? Like, these are guys, you don't have to have a lot of them on the table. You don't have to think real strategically to use them to some degree of effectiveness. Obviously, fighting against an opponent who is strategically inclined and has more experience than you, you will get absolutely obliterated if you don't try to think strategically, but more likely than not, you're outnumbered. You're not throwing enough dice to kill things quickly. They're not a particularly exciting army, and you're going to slowly be sustaining casualties in most games to where it's just kind of that long, slow defeat, right? And every loss that you take is, again, because you're probably heavily outnumbered, is more significant than your opponents. There's just, at least in my opinion, there was nothing spectacular, nothing exciting about them, and I honestly don't know if or when I'll ever play them again. But that's my review of the army. If you enjoy the Stormcast and, and how they play, I would more than be happy to hear about it in the comments below. In fact, I'd be excited about it. I don't want to sell my models for the Stormcast. I like them too much, but I just need a reason to actually try them again. I did win the game, right? But it was just a really slow, boring grind with nothing that was really shiny or fancy that really caught my eye in the entire game. And again, you just, with their dice scores, I don't feel like you bring enough models to the table that you do anything exciting. You're not rolling enough dice with those dice scores required to hit and to wound to be killing enemies quickly or doing severe damage most of the time. Every now and again, you know, there's a few abilities like the Retributors have. The Retributors were the only thing that was interesting or exciting on the table for me. They are quite different to that. You know, they kill things quickly, they're pretty survivable, and they have special rules that allow them to do damage quickly even to big, scary monsters. Like I killed a Stegodon in the first turn that I charged them in to it. I killed it before it even got to attack back. But other than them, the rest of the army was not particularly impressive. So if you are going to play Stormcast, I guess the way to go is just Paladins. Lots and lots of Paladins. Decimators, Retributors, Protectors, and the like. But again, this has been my review of my first game with the Stormcast. Please like and subscribe if you haven't before. I intend to do more kind of reviews of other armies that I play and talk about some of their strengths and weaknesses, not just from a tactical perspective, but from a player perspective in terms of the emotional and mental rewards that I feel like they give or don't give you as the player. But until next time, this is James, and happy gaming.